Over the course of the past 20 odd years, gaming as a medium has gone through some huge and rather dramatic shifts. From the advent of 3D, to the fall of the platformer, the rise of the FPS and the dawn of motion controls, to the toys to life craze, and all the way to the modern day with the age of remakes and cinematic storytelling, the industry as a whole has shifted shockingly often and rapidly compared to other forms of media. With these changes, and particularly rising expectations for essentially every facet of new entries in the medium, the time it takes to develop games has also risen dramatically. Like nowadays, you couldn't just knock out a licensed game for Songs of Praise on the cheap and be down the pub for 5:10. This, presumably, is so developers can not only create the game they want to create, but also to ensure that the quality of the games they're making can measure up to the unconscious yet Herculean expectations created by these long waits and rising price tags games now carry. It's the fact though that the time it takes to create games has steadily increased as technology has evolved that makes it both rather jarring and incredibly impressive to think that between 2001 and 2014 there was constantly a Sonic game on the horizon. Between the release of Sonic Adventure 2 in 2001 and Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric in 2014, the franchise received some new entry every single year. Whether it was a mainline 3D game, a 2D handheld, a racing spin-off, or an attempted franchise extension, there was always something Sonic coming out. Hell, if you're including mobile games and the Olympic spin-offs, the only years since 2001 that the franchise has taken a break from releasing something have been 2018 and 2021. When put into perspective like this, it's insane to think that only 2 of the past 20 years have been completely bereft of the blue blur. Of course, it's no secret that, despite the franchise consistently delivering titles to fans all throughout the 2000s, that not every one of these releases has been of high quality. Whether it be from over-ambition, rushed development, or just peculiar decision making, Sonic has garnered a reputation for being incredibly inconsistent in terms of writing, gameplay, and overall quality because of the variety this abundance of content brought with it. This has led to the internet at large developing a catch-all term for a particular period in the franchise's history, where the quality of specifically the mainline 3D titles became incredibly spotty. This period is commonly referred to as the Dark Age of Sonic, which usually categorises the 5-year stretch between 2005 and 2010, when none of the 3D titles released were widely considered to be good. Typically, people believe this cycle starts with Shadow the Hedgehog and ends with Sonic Colors, and it's this era of the series that birthed concepts such as the Sonic cycle and the general ideologies that Sonic was never good and Sonic had a rough transition to 3D. As all of the sensible people subscribe to me know, however, this is a load of shite. Well, at least partially. While I don't dispute the fact that there's certainly precedent for saying that the Dark Age exists and started in 2005, I'd argue that it only spans 3 years and is broken by the birth of our Lord and Saviour, and my best friend, the Werehog. Now I hear you saying, "Oh come on Joe, is one good game in the span of 5 years enough to say that the series had recovered?" No, idiot. But Unleashed wasn't an isolated incident. In fact, I dare say that Unleashed is the start of a bit of a renaissance for the series, as following its release, we got 4 years, 2008 to 2011, of varied and fun titles which, I think, demonstrate that the franchise had a good handle on what it wanted to be. This means, to me, that the Dark Age only really encompasses Shadow, 06, Secret Rings, and Chronicles, the latter of which released just 2 months before Unleashed smashed the cycle to smithereens. However, while 3 of the 4 games released during this new age of the franchise wouldn't rustle any rumps if they were discussed in a positive light, one of them is still to this day regarded by many as being part of the franchise's darker days. Situated nice and neatly between Unleashed and Colors lies a game which has never quite gotten the shine I believe it deserves. The game in question is Sonic and the Black Knight, which similarly to Unleashed has been panned for the majority of its life, albeit for different reasons. One of which being its very concept. I mean, just look at him. Maybe I have a higher tolerance than others for the goofy things this franchise does, but for a series that had developed a reputation for trying to be increasingly edgy to match an audience that was aging, even the initial image of a grumpy looking Sonic sporting a big old sword did the game no favours from a public perspective from the outset. In context, everything you see in this initial render does make perfect sense, but to get an idea of what this context would be, we quickly need to examine another game that came out 2 years prior to Black Knight. Sonic and the Secret Rings is a 2007 dumpster fire which Sonic Team quickly lost control of. It was initially slated to be a Wii port of Sonic 06, with half of the team from 06 being pulled to work on it. That team, often referred to by fans as Sonic Team's B Team, quickly realised that 06 on the Wii wouldn't be possible, and so shifted their efforts into developing something to take full advantage of the Wii's motion controls, as the huge popularity of the console at the time, combined with its large casual install base, meant that implementing controls utilising the Wii's core gimmick was a must for them at the time. The result of this effort was less than pleasing, however, with a structure and progression system so confusing and a control scheme so asinine that, to this day, it's the only 3D game in the series I actively avoid. It's close to unplayable because of how weird it is, and is what I consider to be the worst game in the series, as, while it has a unique soundtrack and okay story, the fact that I simply can't play it comfortably puts it below anything else the series has spat out before or since. The reason I bring this game up though isn't just to have a go at it, as it's quite important contextually for Black Knight's very existence. Secret Rings was designed to kickstart a sort of sub-series within the franchise, with the games within this new sub-series focusing on Sonic visiting worlds based on popular or classical fiction. Secret Rings covered Sonic venturing into the world of the Arabian Nights, and Black Knight was slated to be the second title in this aptly named storybook series, even going as far as to proclaim itself as being part of it on the front of its box. Unfortunately, it also ended up being the final entry in it as well, due to the incredibly middling scores both titles received from critics. I don't have an incredibly deep personal connection with Black Knight prior to its release, at least nothing on the level of connection I have with Unleashed. I remember seeing the initial render, thinking it was neat, though not quite as on the same level as Mushroom Kingdom Hearts, and moving on with my day. Months later, just 2 months before the game released in fact, I spied it in the back of an Argos catalogue and was really surprised I hadn't heard about it given how soon it was meant to be releasing. I went straight to YouTube, the place where I found all my information for Unleashed, and found the 2009 Tokyo Game Show trailer. You know, the one that's basically just the game's intro. I was interested, to say the least, and have a strong memory of trying to figure out the lyrics of Night of the Wind while at an M&S checkout with my mum one weekend. One thing stuck out to me though. It looked like it controlled completely differently to Secret Rings, and after that game had proper done me in the previous summer, I was eager to find out if they changed how the game would control. I decided YouTube, not Google, was the correct way to find this out, and hey, one guy had uploaded a demo of the game and listed the controls for it in the description. An absolute hero. A 10-year-old me thanks you profusely, sir. Finally, just before I got my hands on the game, in my mind to get myself even more hyped, I found someone had uploaded a full playthrough of the game as they'd bagged an early copy. At first I told myself I'd only watch halfway, but 12 parts later, I'd seen everything from the main story. I was ecstatic to get the game at this point, and after I'd played and beaten it fully, I remember going back to it in between sessions of Brawl, time and time again, to refight bosses, watch the extras videos over and over, and revisit specific stages. Honestly, while my history with this game isn't as deep as with Unleashed, I genuinely think that I came back to this one more often after beating it, and the goodwill I feel towards this game has only been exasperated as I've grown up and come to appreciate what it does well more and more. So today, I'd like to share my positivity with all of you, and detail why exactly I think that this game, much like Unleashed, deserves to be recognised and appreciated for contributing positively to the late 2000s resurgence of the franchise. Much like Secret Rings before it, and as part of the storybook series, Black Knight doesn't take place in Sonic's normal world, but instead in the realm of Arthurian legend. Mostly the events unfold through these storybook-style cutscenes, which do a great job of matching the storybook motif the game at large strives for, with them being just animated enough to effectively convey the emotion of the characters as well as the events of the scenes themselves. Secret Rings went for a very similar style, but there the cutscenes are far more static, which animate less than the ones we see here, so it's nice to see that Black Knight learns from its predecessor in this way. We open up on a gloomy skied England, where a young wizard is fleeing the titular Black Knight. After being cornered by the knight, who summons what looks like an army of demons and monsters to ensure she can't escape, the spellcaster uses a summoning spell first seen in Secret Rings, muttering an incantation hoping that a knight as swift as the wind will appear to aid her. Seemingly, nothing happens. And then... Removing her hood, the girl apologises to Sonic for bringing him in to help her without any warning, with Sonic quickly getting the gist of things before scarfing down one of his chili dogs and wiping out the knight's army, all without dropping his other chili dog. Sonic immediately tries to have a go at the big lad, but before things can kick off, the wizard who summons Sonic holds him back and teleports them both to safety, causing Sonic to lose the other half of his lunch. His mission failed, the knight informs his loyal round table of his next move and leaves, with the three of them lamenting that their king and his kingdom are far different from how it used to be, before setting out to find Sonic and the wizard. Back with those two, Sonic is busy lamenting the fact that he could have bashed the knight's head in until he died, but with the wizard, after introducing herself as Melina, disputing this, claiming that the scabbard that the knight, King Arthur, possesses imbues him with immortality that won't be undone by a couple of homing attacks, and that said scabbard also allows him to summon knights and monsters from the underworld to do his bidding. She pleads with Sonic to help her save her declining kingdom, and the two set off to find the lost sacred sword, Caliburn, which is one of the only things that could strike down the knight for good. They manage to track down the sword, with Melina reminding Sonic that killing a king isn't exactly a heroic thing to do in the eyes of the many, to which he simply responds,
"Guess I can't be the hero every time."
Upon removing the sword from its stone resting place, however, it awakens and begins to berate Sonic for being unfit to wield it as, quite frankly, he isn't a knight. After a quick scuffle with King Arthur, during which Sonic gets to witness the whole can't die thing firsthand, partly on account of him not being adept with a sword yet, Caliburn agrees to help save the realm from King Arthur's tyranny despite being less than enthusiastic about having Knave the Hedgehog as his wielder. The sword suggests they ask Nemu, the Lady of the Lake, how to counteract the immortality Arthur now possesses, as she is the former owner of the scabbard. Before this, however, he insists that he's taken to a blacksmith to sharpen his blade, which is being dulled by being in the stone for so long, as he wants to be presentable when they go to meet her. One jaunt through Camelot town later for a trip to the blacksmith, who happens to look exactly like Tails, the duo descend to the forest to find the Lady of the Lake, but instead encounter Sir Lancelot, a shadow look-alike and one of the knights of Arthur's Round Table. Beating him and stealing his sword incidentally, Caliburn questions why Sonic didn't just kill Lancelot, as sparing a knight is considered to be an insult in this world. Sonic blows him off, and they finally meet Nemu, who's played by Amy Rose. She discusses with them her regrets of ever giving the scabbard to Arthur in the first place, given how it's corrupted him, and says she will only divulge how to undo its power should Sonic overcome 3 tests to prove himself to be good-hearted within 3 days, so that she can ensure that the same will not happen to him after he gets his hands on the scabbard. After freeing innocent prisoners from King Arthur's dungeon, giving to the needy and striking down knights of the underworld, the duo was stopped when returning to the lady by a crying girl, distraught after her village and family were kidnapped by a dragon, and Sonic, despite helping her meaning he will miss the time limit Nemu set, agrees to help the child without hesitation. On the way to rescue the lost townspeople, they find and defeat another knight of the Round Table, Gawain, who tries to kill himself to atone for his loss to Sonic before Sonic tells him to sort it out, there's more to life, and steals his sword too. They return to the child after freeing the people trapped in the Crystal Cave, only to discover that the child was Nemu herself shape-shifting to test the heart of our heroes. Having proven himself, she tells Sonic the only way to usurp the power of the scabbard is to surround it with 3 of the sacred swords, and deal the final blow to the king with the 4th. This means that the only sword left to take is that of Sir Percival, which Sonic does after saving her from falling into an active volcano. Melina returns and congratulates the two before they set off for the final fight with King Arthur, Caliburn taking a minute to say Sonic is now truly worthy of a sacred sword and begins calling him by his actual name. Together, the two strike down King Arthur for good, ending the story. Until a mysterious piece of music in the credits hints that you're not quite done yet. We open back up on Sonic and Caliburn celebrating their victory, only to then see that Arthur, much like his Knights of the Underworld, vanishes into nothingness, leaving the scabbard behind. We then cut to Melina, who is cornered by the Round Table in Camelot, quietly but confidently telling them that the king is no more and was merely an illusion. Sonic arrives and explains what he saw before Melina takes the scabbard and thanks him, stating her intention intentions to use the scabbard to create a kingdom and world that will never die. The Knight and Sonic escape as Melina casts a powerful spell which begins to transform the kingdom, hatching a plan with Nemu to use the magic of the sacred swords to create a barrier to ensure that the magic can't spread beyond the kingdom and affect the rest of the world, till Sonic has dealt with Melina. Sonic confronts her as the other Knights discover that the barrier they've created is not strong enough to stop Melina's spell from breaking through. She reveals to Sonic she knows what will happen to the kingdom eventually at the end of the story, and tries to convince him that what she's doing is right. Sonic has none of it, quite frankly, and as such Melina begins to absolutely batter him, with Sonic going in time after time to try and stop her despite standing literally no chance. After Sonic almost passes out, Caliburn tries to block a shot that would certainly do Sonic in for good, only for Caliburn's blade to completely shatter, effectively killing him. Enraged, Sonic tries one more time to attack Melina but is beaten back, with the Knights of the Round Table telling him to just give up and run. Sonic refuses, saying that
The knight never flees his foe, right? It was never about chivalry for me. I just gotta do what I've gotta do! That's all!
his unwavering determination is enough to awaken the true power of the sacred swords, granting Sonic a set of superpowered golden armor and reforging Caliburn into his true form, Excalibur. Using their newfound power, the two defeat Melina. Like with the other knights though, Sonic makes a point to not kill Melina, and when the dust settles, the first thing he does to a lamenting wizard is give her a flower, saying that while everything has to end, it's best to make the most of the time you have instead of focusing on what was. She sheds a tear for her grandfather, and Excalibur decrees that it is his wielder who shall become the true king of this land. This means that, yes, Sonic is the real King Arthur. The credits roll, and after all is said and done, we get a scene where Sonic is using the events of the game to explain why he had to miss out on a date with Amy that he organised at the end of Unleashed. She's having none of it though, and tries to assault him as we see the title of the book change, from Tales of King Arthur to Sonic and the Black Knight, ending the story. This, to me, is one of, if not the best story the series has ever told. While the main game itself, with cutscenes and all, can be beaten in just around 4 to 6 hours, the story it tells over that time is conveyed brilliantly, both through cutscene and gameplay, to effectively engage you throughout. I think when people say they want darker and more mature stories from the series, this is what they're after, and not characters being grimdark for the sake of it, or spouting words like fuck or heck. Black Knight handles some pretty heavy themes and messages like loyalty, living your life to the full, and death in a mature way, and addresses them in a way which fits these characters perfectly given their established personalities. While the two clear standouts here are Melina and Sonic, who I'll talk about in a second, I think that the rest of the cast is pretty effective too. The Knights of the Round Table and Lady of the Lake all in all don't play a terribly huge role here, but have some nice interactions with Sonic. I like how each carries the personality of the character portraying them, like Lancelot for example, despite being the least involved of them all, immediately challenges Sonic to a duel when he sees him because of the rivalry Sonic and Shadow have. Percival, like Blaze, is a little more reserved and proper with how she handles herself, and Gawain is obscenely loyal to the king in a similar way that Knuckles is loyal to his role as guardian of the Master Emerald. Gawain in particular has some pretty nice interactions with Sonic, with them having some good banter before his fight and a nice conversation afterwards too. Obviously out of the new cast, Caliburn is the one we see the most of, and unlike Chip in Unleashed, he's not some new BFF for Sonic to immediately get along with. Caliburn acts as a teacher and mentor to Sonic, guiding him through the adventure when Melina is absent and acting as a good foil for him. Caliburn's overly proper and chivalrous demeanour juxtaposes well with Sonic's more fast and loose approach to situations, making for some good banter between the two, which helps to establish and further their relationship. Initially, Caliburn is a bit of a knob, as he doesn't see Sonic as being a worthy wielder for him, and takes any opportunity he can to remark how Sonic could be doing better. As time goes on though, the sword warms up to Sonic, and by the end comes to fully respect him and views him as being worthy not just to wield him, but also to take the place of King Arthur as well. It's a nice simple relationship which has some effective development. As I said though, it's Sonic and Melina which are the standouts here, with this, next to Unleashed, being the best in-game iteration of the character we've ever seen. He's got plenty of his trademark attitude with a healthy helping of confidence to boot, but he also knows when to get a bit more serious, calm, and even consoling by the end. Within just the first 10 minutes of the game, he gets to show a range of emotions.
get it. No problem. I'm used to stuff like this. Why'd you stop me? I could have taken him down, no problem.
And the ways in which he deals with the people he meets and the events of the story give us the truest version of the character. There's room for his confidence to shine through. He gives back to Caliburn as good as he gets.
Well then, I shall call you Knave, the Hedgehog.
Whatever, you oversized letter opener.
He selflessly forgoes his incredibly important quest to help someone in need at the drop of a hat, and he never, ever, regardless of what he's told about the rules of chivalry and of the world he's been unceremoniously plunged into, does he try to excessively harm his opponent. Well, except for King Arthur, who he literally cuts in half without knowing he's a knight of the underworld. Instead, he's graceful in victory and just tries to help them. This is the ideal version of this character. A cool, confident and friendly face who's willing to give it all to help others. The way he's written in this game is, next to Unleashed, the perfect way to portray this character, and the writing is brought to life beautifully by Jason Griffith in his final performance as the Blue Blur. Griffith at this point was confident in his delivery as Sonic, and Black Knight cements him as perhaps my favourite actor to ever portray the role, as despite his rocky start in Shadow in 06, by 2009 Griffith fully understood how Sonic should sound, which backs up the great writing we have here excellently. The place Griffith Sonic shines through most though is in the conversations he has with Melina. Voiced by Melissa Hutchinson, who would later go on to portray Clementine in the Telltale Walking Dead games, the Quiet Wizard presents something to the series which it had never seen before at the time, a villain whose motivations aren't completely unjustifiable or downright evil. Every prior Sonic villain was either a mindless monster or had some despicable motivation behind their actions, but Melina doesn't just fit neatly into the box of being a nasty woman. At the start of the game she's a little quiet and initially acts as a guide for Sonic, but she really comes into her own after she reappears towards the end of the first half of the game, and assumes the role of the game's main villain soon after. I like how it's subtly established in the first half that something's not quite right with her being really bummed when this flower dies in her hand and basically saying to Sonic, hey, you know, we gotta kill that king, but it's not a good thing to do, but, you know, we gotta do it, but it's not something good guys do, you know that, right? After the fall of King Arthur, we see this other side that's foreshadowed there, with her being less nervous now that the king is dead and coolly dealing with the knights when they try to subdue her. The sheer calculated confidence she exudes when in the same breath as she thanks Sonic and takes the scabbard from him, that she states her intention to create an eternal kingdom and unleashes her spell to do so without even thinking is spectacular. She is absolutely resolute in her goal, and even when Sonic confronts her in the Dark Hollow, she doesn't lose this collectedness that being the Dark Queen gives her. Instead of immediately attacking Sonic or launching into a tirade about how she has already won, she calmly explains to Sonic why she's doing what she's doing, being cursed with the knowledge of what happens at the end of the story and wanting to prevent it so that things can remain the way they are forever. Even after Sonic snaps back at her, all she does is ask whether he truly understands her sorrow and why she has to do this.
What good is a world that goes on forever?
My sorrow at its ruin runs deeper than the depths of the underworld. Do you not understand?
When she's beating him to death, she's not cackling maniacally or celebrating. She's completely silent. She's doing it not because she wants to, but because she believes she has to in order to achieve her goals, which is echoed in her opening sentiments as the final boss.
You would not understand, nor could you understand. That's why I must do what I must do. I am finished with you.
Hell, even in the boss itself, she takes the time to try and further argue her point.
Your selfishness is going to be the end of it all. Do you not understand? You could never understand my sorrow at seeing the ruined future of this kingdom.
The only time she loses her composure is after she's defeated by Excalibur Sonic, and instead of cursing his name or declaring how impossible her defeat is, she just does this instead.
There is nothing Excalibur can't cut through.
But
Her anguish and disbelief over her loss just coming to the surface here. All the way at the end, she's just trying to convince Sonic that she's right. Melina isn't overtly evil, she's just wholeheartedly convinced that what she's doing is the right thing for her world in the same way that Sonic is convinced that he has to stop it. It's heavily implied the reason that she wants to create this eternal kingdom is that she doesn't cope very well with death, and the end of the game seems to indicate that it was the death of her grandfather, Merlin, that sparked this, as after Sonic consoles her after her defeat, her grandfather is the first person she thinks of. A nice indicator of this relationship is the monster that she conjures to defeat Sonic is essentially a more powerful version of the spell her grandfather used to create the original illusion of King Arthur, as the monster looks just like the former king. The best scene in the game, in my opinion, is when this version of Melina is confronted by Sonic, with her calm demeanour and attempts to justify what she's doing, bringing out the best of Sonic's character. His strong sense of justice, his will to never give up, and the compassion he has for others all shine through hugely before, during, and after the encounter the two have. I think that Sonic as a character is summed up best when, after the dust has settled, the first thing he does is try to reassure her that though she can't prevent death, she can still have a good and full life with the time she has. This is arguably the deepest the Sonic plot has, and probably ever should go. It's simple in its premise, but is so well written with characters that all serve their purpose effectively that it's able to navigate the heftier themes of its message rather elegantly. These messages and story scenes are also backed up perfectly by one of the best soundtracks the series has ever produced. With Jun Sano reprising his role as sound director from the adventure games Heroes and Shadow, the soundtrack is, as expected with Sano, packed with lots of high energy tracks with heavy guitar being a prominent inclusion for the stage and boss themes. Sano noted in a 2012 interview with Sonic Retro from that year's Summer of Sonic that the soundtrack of Black Knight was easier than usual for him to create due to him joining the project over a year in, meaning he could see how the game would look and lock down the style of music more easily based on actual in-engine visuals. On electric guitar being accompanied this time with lots of strings, drums and horns, to give the game a grand, regal feeling which, when combined with the guitar focus Sano is typically known for, creates stage themes which are incredibly fitting for their setting while managing to bring an appropriate high energy that you'd associate with Sonic. There is not a single bad song in this soundtrack. Certainly I have my favourites, but everything in it is gold and pairs perfectly with its stage or cutscene, using the different instruments present to complement the gameplay and visuals perfectly. For the cutscenes we mainly have lighter, understated tracks, which complement the softer visuals this game opts for well, but swells appropriately to match key moments. The level themes are similarly excellent, working in tandem with the set pieces and aesthetics of every stage to create some excellent atmosphere, from the acoustic guitar and flutes of Deep Woods creating a whimsical sense of unknowing, to the drums of Camelot Castle giving off a feel of importance and duty, to the intense guitar of Molten Mine reinforcing the stage's equally intense visuals, to Faraway Avalon, whose track is only heard for one optional side mission, using violins to create a sense of regality that would be expected from the home of a king. These are only a couple examples, and the rest of the level themes also complement their respective stages in a similarly incredibly effective way. That's just speaking about the stage themes though, as Black Knight actually features a pretty prominent number of vocal themes, 5 in total, 4 of which are performed by series mainstays Crush 40. The first of these is Night of the Wind, the game's iconic main theme. Every time I hear the introduction of the song, I get excited. It's such a great song which fits the game really well and is just as hype as any of the other vocal themes the Sonic series has had. However, I don't understand that when Crush 40 sing this song live, much like when they sing Sonic Heroes, they cut out the second verse, which is odd. The next two vocal themes are boss themes for the Knights of the Round Table and King Arthur respectively. The song for the Knights, Slashing Through the Fire, is appropriately high energy and fits all three of the fights it's present in well, and this could also be said for Arthur's theme, Fight the Knight. This song also serves to tell a little story, as there are actually two versions of it. One for the Arthur fight when Sonic first meets Caliburn and he's unskilled as a knight, and one for the second Arthur fight. What's cool is that only the second version has any lyrics, with the vocals being replaced by strings for the first fight. I like this because it highlights that by the end of that part of the adventure, Sonic is considered a full-fledged knight and is recognised by Caliburn as such, granting him the full version of the song, and representing the fact that he is now a truly worthy opponent for the tyrannical king. It's a really heavy track which, while still featuring the strings of the first version, adds vocals which help to ramp up the intensity and spectacle of the confrontation. The fourth and final theme the duo contributed was the ending credits theme, Live Life. It starts out with the same introduction as Night of the Wind, but it's a slower song, with the guitar being complemented by tons of strings and violins. This song, as you would expect, serves to hammer home the message Sonic's speech at the end of the game carries, and I love how starting like Night of the Wind serves to essentially mark this as Sonic's other theme for the game. It's a genuinely lovely and moving song and is, at the very least, the best of the slower, sappier ending themes the series has ever produced, if not just the best ending credits theme the series has ever seen, full stop. This hefty contribution on the behalf of Gioli and Sono, however, to the soundtrack would also mark their final appearance together within the franchise for a decade, with their next featured ditty being Greenlight Ride from 2019's Team Sonic Racing. Crush 40, however, only produced 4 out of the 5 vocal tracks present within the game, with the final boss theme instead being done by series newcomers and Swedish metal band All Ends. These guys didn't stick around, with this being their only contribution to the series, but what they deliver is perfect for the fight it's featured in. Remember Melina's theme that we hear in the first end credits? How about the theme when she first takes the scabbard from Sonic? Now what if I told you both of these songs are foreshadowing for this one? With Me, in a similar vein to what I'm made of from Heroes, isn't an orchestral remix or the game's main theme. It's an original song created specifically for this boss fight. What I love most about the song, aside from the fact that it's just a massive bop, is the fact that, like Fight the Night and Live Life, it punctuates excellently the part of the story it's paired with. When you listen to the instrumentation and lyrics closely, it becomes clear that this is a song for a villain, with lyrics like, The song emphasises the fact that, if Sonic wins, things will continue as they should, and the world of the story will eventually end. It plays on the line Sonic said earlier in the game about not minding being seen as the bad guy if it's what's right.
Guess I can't be the hero every time.
A sentiment he reiterates here as Melina tries to lobby her point again.
Your selfishness is going to be the end of it all. Do you not understand?
I already told you, I don't mind playing a bad guy every once in a while.
The song is Sonic's counter-argument to Melina, literally saying every world has to end and Sonic, if he has to, will be the one to keep it on its course. Obviously it doesn't paint him as being outright evil, with the chorus being an invitation for Melina to face what's on the horizon, not alone, but with him. It's a song that works incredibly well, and elevates a poignant boss fight even further. However, it's not the only incredibly effective use of music in the game.
It was never about chivalry for me. I just gotta do what I've gotta do. That's all. Sonic!
The long-lost light of the sacred sword! Quick, your swords!
It doesn't matter. Not brought back for a cheap nostalgia pop, not just used for the sake of being like, hey, remember Sonic Adventure? Played at a moment of Sonic, despite standing literally no chance of defeating Melina and being told by everyone else to run, refusing to give in because it's just not who he is. The song being used at this moment is to tremendous effect and cements that, despite other games having different themes for him, that this is Sonic's theme because it, even after a decade after the original release of Adventure, still encapsulates the blue blur perfectly. It's also not the only past theme to get some love though. In fact, this game is, through its music, a bit of a secret love letter to fans who grew up with the series throughout the early 2000s, with a multitude of themes from throughout that period being present here. We've got Unknown from ME from SA1 and 2, All Hail Shadow from Shadow and 06, What I'm Made Of from Heroes, Seven Rings in Hand from Secret Rings, and even a Spanish guitar remix of Villanova from Rush, all being present as unlockable themes that you can actually play to replace the level music. My Sweet Passion also resurfaces to play the game out during the final cutscene. Throw It All Away from SA2 plays when we first meet Lancelot, and the blacksmith theme you hear is actually a remix of Tails' theme from SA1 and 2, Believe in Myself. What's nice though is they're either unlockable bonuses or little nods that don't overstay their welcome and aren't particularly overstated, acting as Easter eggs for longtime fans. I think I've made it pretty clear that this soundtrack is excellent for a multitude of reasons. Each track fits the level it's within exceedingly well, providing a variety of moods and tones to fit the locations of each level. The set of vocal themes it presents are all great, some of them bordering on best in the series material, and the soundtrack is utilised to service the story incredibly well. Being blunt, it's one of the best scores to ever accompany a Sonic game. Here's my top 5 for comparison's sake. And you're actively doing yourself a disservice if you don't go and give it a listen. So the soundtrack is spectacular and the story stellar. So as you've no doubt guessed, or perhaps heard through word of mouth, the majority of issues people have with the game lie within its gameplay. This is actually a fairly unique case for the series, but the only thing the game is seen as failing in is its gameplay. As every other game which is talked about as being less than quality in the same way Black Knight typically is, have other issues saddled alongside their own flawed gameplay. There's a couple of reasons for this, but a major overlying dismissive argument that people tend to pull out loud seemingly anytime Black Knight is mentioned to immediately write the game off as not being worth their time is something you can probably guess from context alone. It's a Wii game, released in 2009, and Sonic is wielding a sword. Can you guess what it is? Yes, it's motion controls. It's no surprise that this game uses them, given it was a 2000s Wii game and all the casual freaks who owned a Wii and would probably get the game did love a bit of wiggling. Secret rings included motion controls too, having the Wiimote being held on its side so you can tilt it forward to make Sonic go, back to make him reverse, and left and right make him veer into that given direction, with the one button being used to make him stop dead in his tracks and two being used to charge a jump, which when you lurch the controller forward in the air allows you to homing attack. This sickening calibration crippled that game to a ridiculous degree and makes it close to unplayable with how clunky it feels to this day. Resultantly, Black Knight opts to dial things back a bit, making the revolutionary decision to actually be sensible, and utilising a control scheme which uses both the Wiimote and nunchuck. The control stick on the nunchuck handles your movement, with Z being your block and interact button. A on the Wiimote makes you jump, pressing it again in the air makes you stomp to the ground to make for a pseudo aerial dodge which gets you back to the ground more quickly and, upon landing, gives you a small boost of speed to keep the flow of stages going, leaving the B button to activate a certain other ability which I'll discuss later. This leaves the motion controls with one purpose: moving the sword. This game doesn't provide Skyward Sword levels of interactivity, nor does it require that level of precise motion. It's simply, you swing the Wiimote left, Sonic swings the sword left. You swing the controller to the right, he swings it to the right. You swing it down in the air and Sonic does an aerial spin attack with the sword, which, jumping ahead a bit, is absolutely the best part of his initial moveset, with the only trade-off for its larger range and protection being the slight recovery period when you hit the ground. The idea of handling the sword in this manner makes complete sense, and is a good way to still include the motion controls which were a part of the reason the Wii had become such a sensation a couple of years prior to Black Knight's release. It's all in all a pretty simple control scheme, but it complements the design of Black Knight's stage as well. The game, like its predecessor, is an on-rails experience, with the game constantly driving Sonic forward unless the player intervenes. This would probably lead you to believe that the design of these levels is mostly linear, and you'd mostly be right. Typically, the levels and the missions you complete within them follow pretty set pathways, with only a couple of them offering opportunity to divert and access alternative routes. This is a bit of a shame given the franchise's history with stage design, but I can understand why it's like this in this instance, as the game is mainly mission based and not all of the missions are simple reach the goal affairs. Having this mission structure though allows the game to highlight different sections of each level, like the mines of Molten Mine and the flooding aqueducts of Knight's Passage, as well as featuring fuller versions of these levels complete with set pieces which are unlockable as optional side missions later on. The downside of this linearity, however, alongside the on-rails design of the game, is that the replayability of these levels does suffer a bit. You're, outside of a couple of levels, always going to be going down the same path, and likely dealing with each situation you come across in these pathways the same way each time, meaning that these levels are ultimately less replayable than those featured in other games. Personally, however, I find that the missions the game has you doing make up for this quite a bit, as through their variety in both objective and setting, most of them highlighting specific sections of the given levels, I think they, alongside another aspect of the game's design I'll talk about in a moment, do a good job of mitigating the fact that the levels themselves do suffer a bit from the game's design. The way you unlock each of these missions is also rather simple, with you simply unlocking a new one or a few missions after completing another or progressing the story. It's far removed from the obtuse system we saw in Secret Rings, where seemingly random missions unlocked key story events or missions relevant to move the game forward. Here, it's really dialed back and simplified, meaning it's easy to distinguish which missions progress the story and which are optional. Instead of asking you to navigate menus to select a mission, you instead get presented with this lovely map of Arthur's realm, which makes it easy to keep track of when new missions have popped up, meaning it's simple to see which ones you'll need to do in order to move the story forward. As I just mentioned, there's also quite a variety of objectives on display to keep the game from feeling stale. Things like give X amount of rings, don't get hit, don't hurt anyone, break the crystals, don't touch the ground, defeat Y amount of enemies, the list goes on. Not all of these are winners, I will admit, but for the most part the missions are fun, especially ones which take you through entire levels like any of the reach the goal stages. But some of the shorter ones, like not touching the ground in Shrouded Forest, which fun fact I discovered for the first time while recording for this video, also being great shorter scale challenges. Of course I'd be remiss to not also mention the legacy missions, special missions for each level which replace regular enemies with flappers from Sonic Heroes and replace the blue and yellow fairies in the game with dash panels and rings respectively. These stages also mix things up in terms of combat, having your sword do next to nothing to the robots and meaning that the homing attack actually gets some use aside from setting up from the aerial spin and acting as an aerial dash. These levels also include some nice aspects of timing featured in the main game, with them sometimes asking you to time your homing attacks to take out more enemies as opposed to just missing them completely, meaning that you'll get more points at the end of every level. Beating one of these levels also affords you with the opportunity to unlock a world ring from Sonic and the Secret Rings, and collecting all 7 of them rewards you with the Crush 40 version of 7 Rings in Hand from that game in the collection menu. Also, on a side note, I really like how the map and the game as a whole are presented. It really goes whole hog with the whole storybook theming, and it really makes the game feel cohesive in its presentation as, outside of CGI cutscenes, it's all presented in an incredibly similar style. Of course, this simple control scheme and these linear level designs may lead you to think that victory can be achieved by simply flailing the Wiimote on a constant basis, so that any obstacle is rendered moot. But this isn't the case at all, as the game uses enemy varieties, non-playable characters and certain set pieces to make sure you're not just mindlessly waggling your willy. A Wiimote. For example, in Molten Mine, there's these giant volcanic rocks which require you to deal with them specifically using the aerial slash attack to cleave them in twain, meaning that in certain points of the level you have to be on the watch for them instead of just wiggling aimlessly. Likewise, in the grinding portions of the level, you can't swing your sword excessively, as this means you won't be able to jump until the attack is complete, meaning that if you swing carelessly, you're gonna get slapped by a minecart or two for your trouble. In some levels, like Knight's Passage in the Deep Woods, the boat and cart rides require you to time your hits well and make sure you're facing the right side so that enemies are dealt with quick enough before they can damage your vehicle and Sonic as a result. As well as all this, in most stages you'll come across townsfolk who, if you stop and talk to them, will reward you with both more followers at the end of a stage and sometimes gifts for completing a quick time event which results in you giving them rings. However, if you're just mindlessly swinging as you go forward, you stand a pretty significant chance of hitting the townsfolk by accident, meaning not only will they not talk to you, but they'll also give you an optional emblem and title for the results screen called Heartbreaker, because, you know, you've probably at least maimed someone. Different enemies also encourage different strategies, like these axe-wielding enemies who begin to spin at such a velocity and at such an angle that parrying through by just swinging will almost always get you hit. Instead, it's wiser to block these baddies to ensure they can't touch you before you land a fatal blow. There's also these archer and lance enemies. The lance enemies usually come in different formations, meaning that, yeah, you might be able to parry one of them if you're just swinging your sword and get lucky, but his mates behind and to the side of him are still charging right for you. Archers attack from a distance, obviously, and will always launch an attack before you reach them, meaning you've got to either block or activate Soul Surge to reach them before their arrows can land. There's also these giants that will always get at least one chance to attack you before you kill them, unless you're precise in how you take them down because of their expanded health. And this talk of preciseness leads me nicely to the final move in Sonic's arsenal, which I think does a great job at giving the game some extra depth. Soul Surge is a move derived from Sonic and the Secret Rings Soul Gauge, which, once filled in that game, could be expended to either activate Time Break, which slowed things down massively to help you get past certain hazards, or Speed Break, which gave you a massive boost in speed. Black Knight tweaks this system a bit, having the Soul Gauge activate Soul Surge with the push of a B button. If there are no enemies nearby and you thrust the Wiimote forward, the move will take the form similar to Speed Break from Secret Rings, giving you massive speed at the cost of you moving too fast to stop and converse with townsfolk or open optional item chests. If there are enemies nearby, however, you get this combat variation of the move, giving you a lock-on reticle which, once you swing the Wiimote, will take out the enemy you're locked onto before either moving on to the next enemy or switching to the Speed Break form of the move. This combat variant, however, has an extra ability in the form of perfect hits. When locked onto an enemy, if you wait instead of swinging right away, for a moment the reticle will flash white to indicate indicate the window for a perfect hit has opened. If you swing your sword at the right time to land one of these hits, your soul gauge, which drains whenever Soul Surge is active, will momentarily stall to reward you for your timing. And if you land multiple perfect hits in a row, this transitions into your soul gauge actively being refilled. This is your ultimate incentive to play smartly, with a fuller soul gauge giving you more opportunities to both go fast and execute more perfect hits, leading to a better rank at the end of each level. Another way you can fill the gauge is by performing perfect blocks, stopping enemy onslaughts at just the right moment to punish them and refilling the vital resource that is your soul gauge, meaning there's both an offensive and defensive way to access this ability. Soul Surge is also what I was referring to earlier when discussing replaying levels, as once you start returning to levels with this ability, you'll be approaching them in a different way, looking for the best moments to implement it and seeing where the best spots are for accumulating charge for the soul gauge. This also makes the move especially useful for bosses, where the ranking is based more on time and how many hits you take, meaning playing them carefully to land perfect hits is often the way to go. You can even unlock tutorial videos which illustrate how exactly you can earn the best ranks on these bosses through use of this mechanic. Speaking of the bosses actually, they're all pretty neat. There's a couple of different types of them. The Arthur fights are on rails much like the levels and involve you keeping up with the king while dodging attacks and parrying his swings before moving in to do damage. The second fight also has you building up Soul Surge through parrying to make sure you can catch up to him. The fight with the Dark Queen is in a similar vein but also gives you an aerial dodge maneuver, as well as altering Soul Surge to be far more rapid and having your perfect hits feel proper meaty but much harder to land consistently, with it removing the reticle and relying solely on the sword flashing white, meaning it's a proper test to see whether or not you've mastered how this mechanic works. It's the fights with the Knights of the Round Table, however, which I find the most interesting, with them being set up to feel like real duels with these decorated foes. Each of them fights differently to the others, and each have distinct strategies they'll employ to try and damage you. Lancelot is similar to Sonic, using basic sword swings and the occasional Chaos Blast, both of which are telegraphed quite easily and blocked the first time you face him, but when he returns for his optional super boss he's far more tricky, mixing up timings, throwing in Soul Surge, and Chaos Spears of varying amount to make for a really challenging encounter. Conversely, Gawain prefers fighting from a distance, using his twin swords like boomerangs, but he's also very good at pressuring your blocks when he's up close thanks to his rapid strong strikes that eventually leave him open because of how committal they are at the start and end. And finally, Percival dances in and out of your range using her elegant strikes and devastating Soul Surge, but playing it as calmly as she does and waiting for the right moment will make sure you come out on top. I really admire how distinct yet similar each of these fights feel, escalating in difficulty well enough to really challenge you, especially if you're going for the higher ranks. The reason, beyond bragging rights, that you'd want to do this is so that you can unlock more items through your identification menu. At the end of every stage, you're presented with a screen of mystery objects to uncover. These objects range from books, food, flowers, weapons, and more special items, all of which you unlock using identification points. These points are tied to your ranking as a knight, which increases based on your followers, essentially experience points, which you earn at the end of every stage. The number of followers you earn is also directly tied to your rank, which here ranges from 1 to 5 stars instead of the usual letter grading. To put it simply, better play means a better rank, which means more followers, which means more prestigious titles, which means more identification points to spend at the end of every level, which means more items. These items, aside from completion's sake, can be equipped when visiting the blacksmith to give different benefits, like starting a stage with some soul gauge already filled, starting with 10 rings after a death, immunity to poisoning or confusion, increased luck while opening chests, the list goes on. And getting a better rank specifically in the night duels increases your chance of a special medal item to appear, which once equipped will replace the different level tracks with the themes of the night I mentioned earlier. This isn't just a neat incentive for you to do well in the regular levels, but also specifically incentivizes you to get good at the night fights specifically in order to earn these special prizes, meaning not taking a hit and finishing the fight as cleanly as possible, which often will be through the use of perfect hits and Soul Surge. The weapons you unlock, however, serve a slightly different purpose, as once identified they can be used to create weapons for the Knights of the Round Table for when you revisit certain levels with them, which gives slightly different aesthetics and extra abilities to these alternative characters. Oh, did I not mention? The Knights of the Round Table are playable too. In what would be the last time for a decade, we have multiple playable characters in a 3D Sonic game, which aren't just Sonic himself in some form. While only playable in the levels which appear after Melina transforms into the Dark Queen, those being Shrouded Forest, Great Megalith, the Cauldron and Dragon's Lair, the Knights do bring a decent amount of variation to the game. The approach taken to their design is rather similar to what the series previously employed with the introduction of Tails and Knuckles in Sonic 3, aiming to make the Knights feel similar enough to Sonic, but with key differences which make them distinct in their own right. Starting with the most similar, Lancelot is effectively Sonic with a slower aerial slash, but has the added perk of his soul gauge automatically refilling as you play, a nice nod to Shadow's chaos powers. This means though that he's also got more opportunities than Sonic to execute his soul surge. Yeah. That. Gawain and Percival are where things get more distinct. Gawain, like in his boss fight, has a delay when executing the first follow-up swing of his sword, but makes up for it in the fact that when he does start swinging, he's so rapid and powerful that he's able to deal with hordes of enemies with greater ease than any other character. His soul surge also has him throwing the swords instead of getting in close. His double jump can be extended into his iconic glide, and when you climb a wall, he doesn't have to jump up it like Sonic or Lancelot. Instead, he just uses his sword to spider his way up in a similar way to which Knuckles climbs in the other games. Percival is much slower on her initial swings than the others, but is much quicker than any of them to execute follow-up swings. This means, however, that she doesn't pack quite as much punch and is more restrictive in terms of range, with her moveset and rapier lending themselves more towards controlled thrusts instead of big swings. Her soul surge is also the same as her boss fight. She'll cloak herself in flames and you'll control her as she barrels forward, combining the two aspects of the move together for a unique twist on the maneuver, which also serves to make up for her comparatively limited ability to deal with crowds. She also got some extra aerial mobility too, sporting a double jump to complement her aerial dash and being able to outright run up walls instead of having to climb them at all. I always enjoy playing the Knights when they become available, and while each of the 4 levels is tailored towards the use of a certain character, you do have the option to take any of the Knights into any of the aforementioned levels, so if you really want to see Gawain struggle through the rapid pace of Shrouded Forest, that's your choice, though it will make you miss out on the best line in the game. The best part about the Knights though is that they're actually completely optional. If you're one of those losers who's jealous and gets upset that Sonic has friends, you can ignore these characters completely and just stick with Sonic for the full adventure. What's more, if you find yourself enjoying Gawain or Percival's playstyle more than Sonic and Lancelot's, you have the option to change the way Sonic plays after you unlock the Knights to be more similar to them, through the use of different styles. It's not something I personally spring for, but the fact that the game gives you the option of tailoring how you want to play is pretty neat, and complements the customization stuff previously mentioned with the blacksmith pretty well. As I'm sure you can tell, I have a massive amount of respect for all of the things this game does right regarding its gameplay. While it's not the most complex in relation to its level design, it boasts hefty mission variety, level themes which match the setting of our adventure well and never feel especially similar, unless intentional, playable characters which are all easy to get accustomed to, or just ignore if preferred, and simple yet effective customization to help keep players engaged and to let them play the way they want to. It also, I think, does an excellent job of incentivizing the player to both revisit levels to try and unlock different items which they can use to help improve their ranks, and to actually play well and engage with the mechanics in the game as opposed to just mindlessly flailing until you win. Of course, that approach is possible to employ and may even bring you some success, but I think choosing to actively experience the game in this way is doing it a massive disservice, as it goes so far out of its way to make itself customizable for players, as well as insanely satisfying to play once you get a grip with Sonic's arsenal and, in particular, how to effectively use Soul Surge. It's certainly not the most traditional style of gameplay we've seen from the franchise, but I certainly don't think it's fair to write the game off as being a waggle fest just because it happens to feature motion controls either. One last thing I want to say is something I found myself thinking when playing the game back through for the footage for this video. It first occurred to me when getting footage of these fan art videos you can unlock when you beat the game, which showcase illustrations sent in from all over the world to specifically be featured in this game, that this game sort of feels like the end of an era in the franchise's history, and in a way, it sort of is. The art that's showcased here covers a lot of the franchise's history, stretching all the way from the classic games to the previous year's Sonic Unleashed. These videos, especially since they're all set to a string cover of It Doesn't Matter, feel like a celebration of the fans of the series as well as the franchise as a whole up to this point, and this is only exacerbated by the references to the likes of the adventure titles which were also featured in the game. Black Knight, in some odd way, is sort of like a send-off to the adventure/2000s era of the series, with many elements that characterize the series in this age taking their leave after this game. It's the last time the 4Kids cast would feature in a Sonic game, with Mike Pollock, the voice of Dr. Eggman, being the only one amongst the cast to retain his role, despite Black Knight being the only game in the series to not actually feature the Doctor, outside of an optional item which references him. It's the last time a story within the franchise carried itself with any air of seriousness for quite a number of years, with this being the last game before Ken Pontac and Warren Graff would take the helm and steer the writing for the series in a purely comedic direction. It's the final time the series, in terms of its 3D gameplay, would attempt any form of experimentation for a number of years, which it would quickly shy away from when not met with completely positive reception. I just really think that it shouldn't be understated how neat this game is, man. After years of weird, inconsistent, sometimes awful gameplay and so storytelling designed to be mature through the use of potty mouth exclusively finally caught up to the blue blur, this game, alongside Unleashed, served to remind the world that the series could, as it did when initially jumping to 3D, adapt and create worthwhile gaming experiences. Whereas Unleashed showed that the team had learned from the mistakes of the past and had resultantly opted to completely reinvent the series, however, Black Knight instead takes what had already been established and updated it in response to the criticisms they'd received. It's a massive testament to the fact that this B team that had been taken away from the core team during 06's development were incredibly capable of learning from what they'd done before, and were committed to simply not abandoning the storybook series forever, but instead wanted to better it. A sentiment I wish the series as a whole had carried forward from this point, but you know, there you go. It's honestly quite astounding to see a title in this franchise that learns and adapts so thoroughly in response to critique that it received, modifying controls to make the game feel fun to play while still allowing for customization, simplifying and streamlining menu navigation and progression to avoid confusion as to how to move forward, better integrating the story to have more of a presence and help the missions and objectives feel relevant, and integrating better the motion controls to incentivize good play while still remaining satisfying to use. The fact that the game goes so far out of its way to respond to what didn't quite work previously is even referenced in the 30th anniversary encyclopedia, highlighting specifically the changes that were made to the game's controls. All of this, however, alongside the other positives I've highlighted like the excellent story and incredible soundtrack, meant little for the game at its release. Bluntly, despite everything I've mentioned, the game completely fell flat from a critical standpoint. I mentioned earlier that this game was the last attempt at the storybook series because of the combined middling reception it and Secret Rings received. What I didn't show you though is that from a critical standpoint, Black Knight got the worst end of the stick, with the majority of the reviews for the game being middling or downright negative. This seems like a pretty sad ending for this tale of knighthood, but the scores given to the game by players tell a different story. While there are still a decent share of middling and negative reviews from the community, the proportion of positive reviews that this game received from users, I think, paints a far better picture of the game than the critical scores do. Yeah, it's not for everyone, but the fact that the mixed and negative reviews combined are still outweighed by the positive standpoints, which are also notably more recent takes, shows that over time people have been able to appreciate the game more for the things it does do right. So while initially it did seem like this was a quite tragic tale, I'm happy to find that it looks like the story of Sonic and the Black Knight's existence is finally getting the happy ending I think it's deserved for years.